Welcome to another episode of Indie Insight, the November edition. I have 5 authors that I'll be interviewed, and I hope that you'll take the time to check them out. And here we go. Today I have Stewart BINT with me. Stewart, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Hi, Marnie. Well, first of all, thank you very much indeed for inviting me on. Well, I live in the UK with my wife, Sue, and a somewhat charismatic budgie called Alfie, who features quite heavily on my Twitter account. I'm an author, a magazine columnist, and a public relations writer. And I'm also quite passionate about mental health awareness, having suffered a severe and lengthy period of depression exactly 20 years ago. I've been named on the Defying Mental Illness 2016 list of inspirational mental health advocates that are changing the world. Quite a mouthful of a title, but certainly quite an honor for me to be given that. And I guess you could say that at 61, I'm an aging hippie because I go barefoot most of the time. I mostly eat fish, but I do like a good steak and a good malt whiskey. And although I've worked with words all my life as a journalist and public relations writer, and formerly as a radio broadcaster, my foray into the world of fiction didn't begin until 5 years ago, when my first 8,000-word novella was published.
Tell us a little bit about any projects you're working on.
Okay, well, my latest novel was published by Creativia at the start of September, and that's called To Rise Again. And that's my 4th paperback. I'm currently working on the next one, which is a collection of short stories called Thunderlands. And that really comprises several stories, probably around about 20 when I've finished it. Some very short, will be just around about 1,000 words, so probably what you would call vignettes, right up to, well, that first 8,000-word novella that I was talking about earlier. I'm intending to include that. So that is my project that's currently underway, and it's likely to probably see me through until next spring.
That sounds exciting. Now, I know that you did publish independently Time Shaft. Was that a part of a series? Or standalone?
Time Shaft was one of 3 novels that have been published by my former publisher, Dragon Moon Press. It is completely standalone. All 4 of my paperbacks are in fact entirely separate stories, no connection between them at all. Time Shaft, as the name would suggest, is some science fiction. It's all about time travel. And that was something that I had to research fairly thoroughly. In the book, my time travel mechanism is done through Ley Lines, which actually connect every single point of the Earth through time in my book. But I did have to research nuclear fusion, solar wind, and also the introduction of forks into England by a guy called Thomas Coriati in 1611. and also a little bit about the Globe Theatre during Shakespeare's time. So yeah, Time Shaft, as I say, is one of 4 paperbacks that I currently have out, but it's entirely standalone. And in fact, it's the only paperback that I have that is pure science fiction, although quite a few people do think that I'm a science fiction writer, although there is a little part of science fiction in my latest book, To Rise Again, which my publisher describes as a mixture of fantasy, horror, and science fiction, because there is quite a science fiction twist at the end of that book.
Oh, science fiction, I did assume that was your genre. So, of the genres that you currently dabble in, do you have a favorite?
I suppose my favourite really is science fiction, although I do like horror and paranormal. My first paperback, In Shadows Waiting, that is sort of pure paranormal with a little bit of horror thrown in, but not very much. That is pure paranormal. I am really interested in the paranormal and horror, and I mean, certainly both novels, In Shadows Waiting and To Rise Again, were both inspired by real-life events. The the real-life event in To Rise Again, really fairly boring, I suppose. It was when my wife and I were on our honeymoon on the island of Jersey 35 years ago now, and we visited the German underground hospital on Jersey. So that was really what inspired this particular book. And it's been sort of, well, the idea has been swirling around in my mind for all these years, and has only just seen the light of day. But in Shadows Waiting, which came out a couple of years ago, the actual supernatural entity that I describe in that book towards at the end was actually something that I saw myself when I was working for the BBC in the 1980s. I was in digs in Manchester, and my job then was to read the early morning news bulletins on BBC Radio Manchester. So I had to be at the broadcasting studio at about 6 o'clock in the morning. So leaving my digs at around about 5:15, one cold, frosty November morning, I just got the key in the lock to unlock the door to go out, to scrape the ice off the car, and suddenly felt the hackles really rising on the back of my neck. And I turned round and saw at the top of the stairs the creature that I describe in Shadows Waiting, which was a sort of a misty, smoky figure, and where the eyes should be were just red holes. And that again inspired me to write In Shadows Waiting. But again, life and all sorts of things tend to get in the way of fiction, and it wasn't until my children were grown up that I really did turn my hand to writing fiction. And once again, that was when this particular novel saw the light of day. So I suppose you could say that although I do like science fiction, and that is my favourite genre, I think that because of my experiences with the paranormal, I suppose that comes a very, very close second. Because my genres are sci-fi, paranormal, and my previous book, the third one, The Jigsaw and the Fan, is pure satire and comedy. It's about a disgruntled ghost who goes on the rampage in a stately home.
The indie community. I know that you've been a big part of it. I met you in a group. So, do you feel like the indie community is integral in your success as a writer?
Very much so, yes. I mean, you mentioned earlier about the fact that I'd self-published Time Shaft. I certainly self-published the first edition of Time Shaft, and then when I was picked up by a mainstream publisher, they looked at it and basically made me tear it apart. There was about 3 months worth of editing required on it before they would bring it out in the paperback and also the new ebook edition. I think in terms of indie authors, yes, that really was what sparked off my my career as a fiction writer, becoming an indie author. And I would say that my experience then with being picked up by a mainstream publisher shows the real importance of indie authors getting their work professionally edited, because I didn't. I just did it all myself, and that's what happened. The editor at my previous publisher required 3 months worth of work on it, bringing in new scenes, changing the order of chapters, in fact, bringing in as the prologue what was a complete chapter midstream. So yes, I think that the indie world is extremely powerful now, but in terms of actually becoming a good indie author, I do think that you do need to have your work professionally looked over by editors.
Oh, absolutely. My second and third book were edited by Ellie Fitzpatrick,
Yeah.
and she taught me so much in the short time she had with my books, that I'm actually going to go back and re-edit my very first book with another editor. Is there any interesting research that you've done along this way?
I think most of my research tends to be fairly boring. I suppose, like many other writers, I just tend to go onto the internet and Google things. But there was one piece of the research that I actually had a complete first-hand experience of. A couple of years ago, I wrote a novella called The Twitter Bully. Now, that revolves around victims of a Twitter bully getting revenge on the bully in a particularly horrific and gory way. Now, much of that story takes place with the bully being handcuffed and barefoot, locked in a tiny, icy cold cell. The build-up to the final revenge is quite slow and menacing. And I really needed that I felt to accurately portray how the bully would feel in that totally vulnerable position. Now, I have a friend who's a police commander, and he very kindly arranged for me to spend a couple of hours in that very predicament. So I really did suffer for my art in a very small decommissioned cell. It had been a holding cell in a local police station, but it was decommissioned because it was just too primitive. I was left in there for a couple of hours, barefoot, my hands cuffed behind my back. And I hope that that really did make for a very realistic description of the increasing despair that the bully felt as he was getting more and more worried and more concerned and uncertain as to what fate was going to befall him. And as I say, my friend left me there in that tiny cell for a couple of hours, and it really was a very sobering experience. Interesting, and I do feel that that actually led to the Twitter bully story being much more realistic in the final build-up. To the really final gory details as to how the Twitter bully met his end.
Wow, that is like definitely like going above and beyond to research your art. I just actually like my heart started racing even thinking of being locked somewhere like too long in a scary place. Such a shame. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me today. It's been a very delightful conversation. I hope that everyone runs out and picks up all your books right now. Go get them. They're amazing. So
thank you. Thank you very much, Martin. It's been a great pleasure. Thank you for having me along here today. Thoroughly enjoyed it.
welcome to another edition of Indie Insight. Today's guest is Sunshine Somerville.
Hi, that is my real name. That's a good tidbit for the first bit of info. I'm a science fantasy dystopian superhero author, and then I just started a new series that's urban fantasy, and I also have a fairy tale for middle grade kids. So that's kind of the range of books that I write. I've been writing since I was 9. when I first self-published my first book. And then it's just been a hobby that I've been taking more seriously lately. So it's been really fun, and I really enjoyed being a part of the whole indie community.
Great. Well, thank you for joining me. Why don't you tell me a little bit about what you're working on?
I'm working on the Alt World Chronicles, which is the urban fantasy. It's going to be a trilogy for now. I might do more with that later, little spin-offs. It got based on, I had this recurring dream over and over of waking up, kind of just suddenly appearing in a bar naked, but with like, so everyone else there looked exactly like me. And I just kept having this dream over and over. And then one day in the shower, poured into my brain. So I was like, that's really good. So I quick got out and wrote it all down. So I just finished the draft of Alterni, which is the first book. And so that's going to be sent off to the proofreader soon. I've been getting some feedback from some beta readers, so that's been pretty exciting. And I really, really enjoy just working on something totally new.
Exciting. I know that you do write the Coda series. So it seems like series are kind of your thing.
Yeah, I think it's just because I really enjoy world building. So trying to do anything in just one book, I find kind of constrictive to just how I like to tell stories. So this will probably be a trilogy. And then if something else in that kind of world happens, it'll probably be with different characters. The Coda series is 4 books, and they're each on a different planet. So that's kind of how that worked out for doing series. And then I just have some little companion stories that go along with that, again, because I can't stop fleshing out the world.
So what is your inspiration to write? Do you have anything that you can pinpoint?
I think I've just always had a crazy imagination, and I love stories, and I've always just wanted to be a part of that creative world, I guess. So I think anytime that I read something that's really good or watch a movie that kind of inspires my imagination, I think that just really amps me up to then want to go to create my own story.
You also draw, like you're an artist.
Yep, I do my own covers for all of my books, and I like to do some fun little extra like character sketches and stuff that I post on, I think, Facebook, and they're all on my website.
So do you like writing better or drawing better?
It just depends on, I think I definitely get in like the mood to write, and I will do that for like 8 hours a day. And then if I get burned out with that, like the drawing thing is a nice alternative to like still feel productive and creative. But yeah, it's just the very different sides of my brain almost, it feels like. So just kind of whatever my headspace is at the moment, that's what I'll focus on and spend way too much time doing rather than real life duties.
I understand that. I can't draw at all. It's quite embarrassing. Don't even try. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for like taking the time out of your schedule to talk to me. And I hope everyone will check you out. I always ask this question to everyone because I love research. I'm obsessed with like picking something to just distract myself from doing what I need to do and focus on researching like little stupid things. Like for my last book, Envy, I decided Blanche Dryden needed like a fantastic wedding dress, and I didn't have a wedding, so I didn't know what would be like a, I knew I was born in the 70s, so everything to me, wedding dress is big and fluffy. So I thought she has to have something like really like shocking and rich looking. So I had to like look up all these wedding dresses. So is there anything that you have in research that you find really interesting, or are you kind of research in your head only?
No, I do research a lot. I'm one of those definitely, like, you don't want to look at my Google history because it's like how to decapitate, and stuff like that. The thing I've been researching most lately is just because the Alterni is set in reality. I've never really done something that was like contemporary Earth before. So I did, for research, it's been kind of nice to actually be able to drive to places in Kansas City and like see what street connects with what and like what the vegetation is around it. So that's been a different thing for me rather than just doing online research. So that's been kind of nice. I did a lot of research about the police system here. I did that mostly online. But yeah, I guess I definitely get on tangents of like, okay, I need this for like one sentence, and then you just look up everything related to it for no reason. You don't need it, but I definitely do that.
Yeah, like 2 hours later and 40 posts later. You've like not written a word. I like to do.
Yep.
I'm so proud of myself. I do also ask, because I don't want to take up your time. I know you're very, very busy. The indie community. I feel like the indie community is warm, welcoming, and I've had nothing but an amazing experience with it. Would you feel the same way about that?
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I talk to people online that I've never met face to face more than I talk to real friends from like back home, especially while I've been stuck here in a state where I know like 4 people. So it's been really nice, even aside from getting writing advice, of just like people become friends because you have this thing that drives us, we all have in common. So I think that really helps to build relationships with people aside from just, giving advice and offering to read, and like all that stuff is there, and it's great too to help you develop your craft. But I think just everyone I've met have just been genuinely good, interesting people.
Thanksgiving. Is there anything that you're thankful for?
This year in particular, I'm thankful that on my birthday, which is on Thanksgiving this year, our lease is up here in Missouri, so we have to move back to Michigan, where I'm from originally. So I think this year I'm just very aware of being thankful for like family and the sense of home, which we've just never really had down here. So I think that's a big kind of a comforting thing that I'm looking forward to having again. Thank you for having me. I'm glad we got this in before the storm is kicking in. There's like streaks of lightning. I'm like, oh, shiny.
Well, I'm not going to keep it then. I don't want you to get zapped because electricity will kill. And I'd be really sad.
Well, then you'd cry. You'd just get yourself on camera. It'd be fine.
I would cry. Today's guest, Leanne Marshall, known as author name LT Marshall, is here with me today. Hi, Leanne. Can you tell me a little bit about yourself?
Hi there. Okay, so I live in Scotland, obviously, and I'm from central Scotland, which is sort of the best part of Scotland. I am in my 30s because we never digress our age when we're ladies. I have 2 children. I live with my fiance. I've been with him for 13 years, and I've been writing since I was 17. I was first offered publishing as a teenager and turned it down and joined a girl band. So I've had a really interesting life. I've been a singer twice. I was offered a job in TV, radio, ran an animal rescue for reptiles and exotic animals, which included talks and rescuing. I've been a trained masseuse, beauty therapist, makeup artist, photo lab technician, and many other wonderful, crazy things. Because I'm one of those people that get very bored very easily. But you know what? I came back to writing because it's always been in me, and it's pretty much one of the only things that makes me focus and stay en route. I am also an artist and a designer, and I actually do both.
Well, that's fantastic. So, when you have time, could you tell me about the writing projects that or any projects that you're working on right now that you want to share?
I'm currently working on part 2 of my latest book. It's a series called the KRISTINA series. It started with a trilogy. It was supposed to end with a trilogy, but in the last book, 2 characters stood out to me. So I released a 4th book with the intention of it being just a 4th book, but the plot spread into 2 books. So I'm now doing the second part of the 2 books. That's kind of where I am right now.
So do you have muses that talk to you, or like what inspires you with these stories? Like I know for me, I have this strong like voices in my head that these characters speak to me, and they're always beating into my brain. Like I'm like, go away, it's not your turn. I'm not working on you right now. But sometimes they're so powerful, they make you listen.
Yes. Since I was little, I've always been somebody that thinks in movies. I don't know what they call that, but that's how my mind works. I only see things in movies, even memories is part of being Asperger's. Always got these movies playing in my head, and sometimes a certain movie will stand out and it'll plague me, and that will become my book.
Wow.
I don't know, I've always been that way, so to me it's nothing different. And these characters in these movies have just sort of followed me for a long time, so
And you enjoy the stories you have? Like, do you enjoy the stories, or is it something
Yeah.
you wish they'd
I
quiet?
feel like if I don't get them out and I don't put them in a book, they'll literally stay with me for years. I had a 20-year writing break, and the story that I came back with was actually one that I wrote when I was 17 because it plagued me that entire time. And then once I get it out of my head, a new movie takes its place and it starts all over again. So I become kind of obsessed with them. They become like real people to me, like watching a movie, but one that won't leave until I write the book. So yeah, I do become pretty hyper focused until one book is out of the way.
I always ask the question about research, because as an author, I know many of us like try to be really authentic with what we do. I've given examples of where I've had to look up what a yacht would look like, a very luxurious yacht, and try to get the right terminology. Or in my book, also spells, like trying to make herbs that wouldn't kill you. Is there anything that you've ever had to research that you? Um,
The trilogy was based in New York, and I've never been there. So I literally had to sit on Google Maps and TripAdvisor and every website I could find to look up places in New York, pictures, how the buildings look, even the street addresses, sorry. I even had to look up the cost of rent per month because my two characters are like chalk and cheese. One's from the low end of the wage bracket and one is a billionaire. So I had to look up apartment prices and then areas that somebody could afford if they had my main character's job and she's just like got a normal wage. It was really weird, but yeah, it took me a few weeks of researching just that. I think some of it as well was the terminology, the American terms for things was something. Oh, everything's going crazy. Some of the things that I had to research was what you would call like a sidewalk or just little thing, an elevator, because we don't call them those things. We call it a lift or a pavement. So yeah, I had to take a huge list of about 30 or 40 words and look up the American terminology because everyone kept pointing out I was too British. Clearly.
you said you're a singer and you were in a band.
True, actually, yeah. I was when I was 18, I was in a girl band for a year. We kind of made a splash in Scotland, and I don't know if you remember the band Boyzone. There was a man, Marnie Cate, was in this band. He offered us a contract along with Sony Records, and we were actually offered quite a few contracts before we split up. But I decided it wasn't for me, and I left and joined an indie band with 5 men. And we were nominated as there's a campaign in Scotland called the Drinkwise campaign, which is about safe drinking, being responsible. And we actually won and were the face of the Drinkwise campaign for a few months. And at the end, we were offered a record deal. And once again, I decided it was not for me and I walked out. So, yeah, that was my 2 stints in the musical world. I just decided I didn't really like it that much, sadly. But I actually trained and prepared me for a lot of other jobs, I think. It gave me the ability to be really sociable and like get up when I became like an animal rescue talker. I could stand up in rooms with people and just chat away. I think it did that for me. So it was never a bad thing.
No, it was just part of your life journey. That's really cool.
Yeah. I'm just one of those people though. I see something that I want to do and I don't think about it. I just jump straight in. And I've had some crazy jobs and crazy experiences because of it.
And
I think it's just in my books.
and it's all in my books. And right now, you're a mom. You have several kids.
I've got 2 children, but I'm also self-employed. I have an online store. I do like crafts and jewelry, and it's all unicorn and rainbow themed. And it's like the other side to me. Everyone makes this joke that I have a split personality because my writing is a bit dark and gritty in a way, and not what they expected. And then my art side is very fun and bright and young and childish, and they're complete different sides to each other. They're like opposite ends of the spectrum.
The indie community has been so gracious and welcoming, and I just can't imagine like not being able to write without them.
It's one of the better communities. I mean, I come from a craft and art community. I did that for 10 years and didn't know anything about books. And I have to say, it's not a nice community. It is very backstabby and bitchy, and everybody looks at each other as competition and steals each other's designs. And it's a very nasty community, which I hate because I'm not like that. I mean, I run groups that teach people crafts. And then when I became a writer, I was very not untrusting, wary when I first got into the book community. And the first signing I did, I met 20 authors, and I knew none of them, and they all knew each other, and I was terrified, knowing from craft communities and things I'd been to that it's very much watch what you say, don't let people near, just take your friends with you and keep them close. And then I walked into this book signing really far away from home with just my partner, and it was completely different. They're genuinely a lot more accepting and loving.
Oh, absolutely. And they can write the same genre as you, and they
Yeah.
don't, and they'll
still share your books.
They'll promote your stuff. There's no, I'm like, we write the same genre, but guess what? I'm not worried that I won't get readers if you get a reader.
Exactly. It's a completely different attitude. They don't care if your books are even similar or you use the same cover model. They're just like, sure, I'll promote your book.
Exactly. I'm very grateful for the indie community. And so
yeah. Oh, I'm only new to it. I've only been doing this for 10 months. And so yeah, it was all I only really met authors 3 months ago. Up until then, I was blind to the fact there was a book community. I just went on my own social media from my arts and crafts side, and I was doing it on my own. And then 3 months ago, I don't even remember how, I just ended up in this community, and then it just grew from there. And the difference it's made has been huge.
thank you so much for taking your time out of your day to send
No, it's fine. It's our evening here, so this is me just chilling now.
Another edition of Indie Insight. Today I'm with author THERESA Parker. THERESA, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
My name is THERESA Parker, and I write paranormal mysteries. I'm currently working on book 4 of my Andromeda Spencer series, which will hopefully be out sometime at the beginning of 2018.
Can you tell us a little bit about anything you're working on right now?
My Andromeda Spencer series revolves around my character Andromeda Spencer, Rami, to her friends and family, who was struck by lightning as a teenager. She spent a month in a coma, and when she woke up, she had psychic abilities. Now, as an adult, she works with the local police department finding missing people. With her narcoleptic cat Polini, yes, I said narcoleptic cat, and her crazy family, the Andromeda Spencer novels are a really fun read. In fact, Lightning Strikes, the first book in the series, recently won an award in the Reader's Favorite 2017 International Book Awards.
Writers love research. Every once in a while we have to get out there and look into whatever subject we're writing about. Is there anything interesting that you've had to research along the way?
I think that maybe Tesla coils and Faraday cages are probably the most interesting things that I've researched so far to date. You'll find those in Melody of Murder, which is book 2 of the Andromeda Spencer novels. It's hard to kind of talk about it without giving away the plot of the book, so I'm just going to kind of leave it there. It was fun to learn about Tesla and the Tesla coils that he created and the Faraday cages that are made to protect the people around all that electricity. So yeah, that was really fun.
Writer's block, myth or reality? And if you do say reality, how do you get past it?
Wow, okay, yeah, that's a hard question for me. I don't believe in a total block as in, oh, I can't write another thing. That's just not possible. I think I get stuck on the little stuff, you know, the little filler stuff that gets you from point A to point B. Sometimes, yeah, you end up rambling, like kind of like what I'm doing now. But when that happens, I usually just stop what I'm doing and I go and do something that doesn't really involve my brain too much, something that allows my mind to wander. I design book covers for selfpubbookcovers.com. So usually if I'm stuck and I can't go forward in the story, I'll just open up a cover I'm working on and just do a little bit of work on that until something pops into my head. And usually something does pop into my head and lets me, just go ahead and move forward.
What inspired you to write, Theresa?
Oh, let's see. Everything inspires me to write. Mostly it's the images I see in my head. Okay, yeah, that just totally made me sound like a crazy person. What I mean is that I have a very active imagination, and just about everything and anything will trigger it. Okay, like my Andromeda Spencer novels began with not Andromeda Spencer, but Polini, her narcoleptic cat. I was watching TV one night, and this commercial came on. It had a Vine-like video sequence, and in one of those little tiny short video vines, it had a clip of a cat doing like a Garfield face plant. And as soon as I saw that, I laughed to myself and said, "Oh, narcoleptic cat." And the first book just kind of flowed right after that.
Thank you so much for taking the time out of your schedule to meet with me. It's been a fascinating conversation, and I hope everyone will check out your books. Thanks again. Welcome to another edition of Indie Insight, and today's guest, who I forgot to ask how to pronounce her name, KRISTINA.
RIENZI, like the pasta. I always say that, RIENZI.
KRISTINA, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. I am a suspense author from New Jersey. I actually live at the Jersey Shore, only a few miles from the beach, which is pretty cool. I write in all genres of suspense, mystery, thriller, paranormal, sci-fi, horror, everything, you name it, is what I like to write. I have a history in psychology as well as senior management in corporate America, so I bring a little bit of those pieces to my stories. I'm a wine lover and a dog mom, and that's probably the most important stuff I need to say.
Thank you so much for joining me today. Can you tell me a little bit about anything you're working on or your current projects?
Sure. Actually, I just had a story published in an anthology that just came out this week. It's in an anthology called 30 Shades of Dead. It's a mystery anthology. I'm actually president of Sisters in Crime Central Jersey. That just came out, so that's exciting. It's a compilation of different mystery short stories. Right now, I'm actually going through the editing process on a sci-fi thriller called Among Us. And it's a story about a professor who gets a hold of a government document with some interesting and shocking information that she tries to reveal. But of course, there's a secret agency after her. So there's a little bit of a back and forth on that. But I'm editing that story now. I was hoping to release it this year, but we'll see. Editing is such an important part of the writing process. So we'll see how that goes. And then always working on multiple projects. So I have 2 other projects I'm finishing. I have a cozy mystery called Sip Happens about a wine editor who finds a dead body in a barrel of wine, which is kind of fun. And I'm also working on a psychological thriller called The Serial Killer's Wife, which I think kind of gives you an idea of what that's about. So lots of stuff going on.
Wow, that sounds really cool. So what inspires you with all these different, well, I know the wine part is because of your wine love, but wow, what inspires you to think someone's in a barrel of wine and I got to write about this murder?
You know, it's funny because I tend to go on the dark side, and it's just from a history of just having an interest in what makes someone evil. That's kind of where I went when I got into psychology and went down that road. But this was a fun story because it's cozy mysteries tend to be, more of like a classic mystery with a humor and lightheartedness about them. So there's not a lot of darkness. It's pretty lighthearted and fun. And I don't know, I figured, you know what, take my love of wine and local New Jersey wineries, which is a little different than your typical winery story. We have a lot of of great wineries in New Jersey, and just combine it with my love of mystery, with a character that's completely different from anyone I've written before, because she's kind of spunky and young and fun, and my characters tend to be on the dark side. So everything inspires me. I'm really big into true crime. Also, obviously the psychology behind why people do the things they do. So I tend to get my story ideas either from headline news. A lot of times it's forensic file type shows. I'm dating myself with that because it's an old show. But shows like that tend to give me some ideas. And then just going through life and wondering the big what if. What if this happens? And really, I write about things that scare me or things that interest me. That's
a good way to go. I got scared actually thinking about it. I'm such a chicken, I swear. So embarrassing. But I do I'm from you. I do watch these crime dramas and stuff, and they mortify me, and I just still watch them.
Yeah, they're terrifying because you just, to think that the person next door to you or someone you've known all your life could be harboring this evil inside of them. And that's a very real thing. It is terrifying. I kind of scare myself when I'm writing, which I guess is a good thing for the reader. But certainly I like to work through that fear in my stories. And that's part of my passion for writing is to work through my fears and hope that the reader gets to work through some of their fears in when they're reading my stories.
Research is very important when you're writing, for authenticity, but also just to make your story pop and come to life. Is there any interesting research that you've ever done that you might be interested in?
In terms of a lot of stories I write are based on places I've been or experiences I've had where I've learned about something, or my winery. There's one winery I visit on a regular basis that I sort of built this story around. But most recently with my sci-fi thriller, I did a lot of my research online, but I know that isn't always the best place because you don't know. You really have to do your homework in terms of what you're reading is true and what's just out there for entertainment. But I tried to write my story with a lot of facts. Based on real government documents, things that happened in history, things that happened in the presidencies over the years. So I did a lot of audiobooks. I read a lot of things online, and I found a lot of things that terrified me, quite honestly. There are just some things that you don't want to know. And that I say, okay, that's out there, but I'm going to pretend it's fiction because I really don't want to know. So with my story, Among Us, it has to do with a government alien conspiracy. And it really dates back to, the 1950s, and comes forward. One of the main characters, or I should say the supporting character in the story, it begins in 1967 when there's an incident. And there really was an incident that happened in 1967. I changed the story to, obviously be fiction. I didn't pull from exact fact, but I try to use elements of it. And whether true or not, there are government documents out there that exist. They're terrifying, and a lot of the classified information was recently released based on the Freedom of Information Act. So I looked into the Freedom of Information Act a lot, and there are just some things I thought, God, I love this topic. This is terrifying to me, the possibilities. I have to explore it, but I'm also you walk away going, wow, this, if this stuff is really real, it's scary.
Definitely. And if you're going to write about it, it's even more scary.
Yeah. And while I'm writing about it, I get a doorbell. I'm researching, my doorbell goes off, and we have camera outside the front door, and there's no one there. And I go down and I'm like, oh my God, so of course your head goes. I mean, it could have been anything. It could have been a bird, but you're going, well, who knows I'm on the internet, who's tracking what I'm writing, it is scary stuff because you read the stories about the people who disappeared. The things that happened that, were unexplained after someone tried to kind of reveal, things that they found out, and how that those secrets were sort of buried, and how the United States really has a big part in that because other countries, they're not afraid to talk about this stuff. So yeah, scared me a little bit. That was research. I was like, I'm not really comfortable doing this research. And I keep telling myself, it's fiction. You're writing fiction. It's okay. If anyone ever says anything, you can tell them it was all made up in your head. It's fiction.
Yeah. Except in the video now saying that you researched it.
Right, exactly. Now I'm out there, but it is fiction. I mean, the story is totally made up. I mean, everything about it. I try to use real claims and reports and things I found just as a basis because it's interesting stuff.
Fast forward to 5 years from now, where do you see yourself?
I see the author I am in 5 years. Like I see her. I want to be her now, and I'm not there yet, but I'm chasing her. Like I'm chasing her, and that 5 years is rolling, but ahead. And I'm chasing her every time I write a story. It's like I'm going to be better in this many years. Like I can see what my writing looks like. I can envision it. Like it's better. It's stronger. It's it's that bestseller, New York Times bestseller worthy work. Like I see it. But it's a process to get there. It's like anything else. You've got to, do it as much as you can do it, work really hard at it, and also keep your voice, keep your story. Because at the end of the day, it really is all about the story. The story has to be good. You can always fix grammar. You can always fix, any of those kind of writing things that we go through, the editing process. You can always fix those things and have somebody help with that. But the story has to come from you, and it has to be good. You have to be interested in it, so your readers will be interested in it.
I absolutely believe that. Thank you so much for taking the time to meet with me today. It's been a pleasure talking to you, and hopefully we'll talk again one day soon.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, Marnie. I truly appreciate you having me on your show.
Joining us for Indie Insight. I hope you enjoyed watching the show as much as I enjoyed making it.
Oh, hello there. This was another episode of Indie Insight. And remember, it is always a good time to go in.